Please welcome Cameron Kasky.
I have to tell you, that was the first time somebody's ever done the intro story correctly. It's always either the high school name gets mixed up for any other three words that start with M, S, and D. I've heard some interesting things. And then we've gotten Parkland High School. One time I was told that apparently I was from Parkland Middle School, which, I mean, I appreciate. I'm glad my skincare routine is working and I look younger. But hey guys, thank you for joining us today on this snowy and cold morning. I'm going to be spending a bit more time here today. My flight out got canceled, so Yang Gang all over Iowa is going to be seeing my mug. But I'm glad you guys came here, and I'm glad I got to come here. This place is awesome. I wish I had somewhere like here where I'm from. So I'm here. I've been here the past 2 days to get the word out, mostly because one of the main reasons I was a bit hesitant to join the Yang Gang and to get behind Andrew was I knew that it would be a lot of effort to get involved, and I did not think when I first got to see Andrew speak that we'd make it here. And now, I mean, there's a poll just came out that puts Andrew at 5% with the Des Moines Register. It's one of the biggest fundraising forces in recent political history. And the Yang campaign has shocked and amazed people all over the country and gave me an opportunity to say, okay, now I get to see this candidate that's proposing answers to questions I never knew I should ask, and get involved, because a lot of people around the country were able to say, I'm done trying to compromise. I'm done playing into a game that we all already kind of lost, and now it's time to rewrite the rules. So I'm grateful to everybody at Yang's campaign for letting me get involved now, and I'm excited to see where we go in the weeks to come, because again, the numbers everywhere across the board with Yang's campaign are they're rising faster than normally my blood pressure, which is really exciting. Speaking of which, I love Yang's position on Medicare. But right now we're at a really crucial point. The caucus is about to happen. It's time to start looking into who's going to caucus, who's going to be getting involved on as things get a little bit more. I don't want to say, you know what? I'm going to call this positive dread. Positive dread is where you see something giant coming that is intimidating and scary, and you do the Yang Gang thing, which is run into it and face it anyway. This has been a very confusing, stressful, annoying, and depressing couple of years for this country. And looking into the policies that Yang has proposed, and looking into all the solutions, and looking into all the opportunities that my generation has had to take the future into our own hands, and all the investment that Yang is making in people my age, people who now have to face this new economy that's coming and not know what we're looking at. It gave me a lot of hope, and it gave me the opportunity to learn and research and look at things that I hadn't before, because there are a lot of different issues for which we're seeing solutions that have been discussed countless times. Healthcare, climate change, a lot of candidates are offering, solutions, and they're offering their policies based on focus grouped versions that are the most marketable to different people in democratic bases. I mean, that's what we see. That's why we see a lot of candidates roll out different policies very slowly and on very strange schedules, as they want to see what works. Yang came in and said, hey, you know what works? I'm gonna ignore every single thing that you all think is marketable to people, and I'm gonna do what I believe. And if you like it, great, come on, join us, and let's talk to other people about it. And that was something that raised a lot of eyebrows. I was here over a year ago at an event where a lot of different presidential hopefuls were speaking, and I remember seeing Yang speak, and this is young Yang. This is Yang before he knew that all these people around the country were going to support him, and he was out there really just talking to people, and he was doing the Andrew spiel, and I remember it ended with, and remember, I think that the best person to beat Donald Trump is an Asian guy who loves math. And I was like, who is this guy? I love it. But I remember hearing everything he said that night and saying, that's all very fascinating. who is Andrew Yang? And I spoke to my uncle, who had who was a manager of some sort of money. I'm not sure. Anytime money gets involved, I normally look away because I get confused. But he said that he had dinner with a lot of his friends, and a couple times Andrew and his wife Evelyn had come, and that they were just the best. And I said, okay, great. So what is he trying to, what are his policies? And he said, I don't know. Andrew's just the best. We love Andrew. We've known him for 10 years. He's the sweetest guy. We love him and his wife. His kids are wonderful. And I said, but do we know what to... So we all looked at the website together, and suddenly I started to see ideas that I thought were completely new. Yeah, universal basic income, for example. I didn't know that that was a key part of the Democratic platform for a good chunk of the 20th century. I didn't know what it was. I thought that was something that, it was just... I thought that was the best case scenario and something that would happen in a perfect world, and not something that was completely accessible, and not something that was a future that's very attainable very soon. I looked at human-centered capitalism, and I thought that that was an oxymoron. Capitalism, generally speaking, works against humans. It's humans using capitalism against each other. And that was what I had decided was the world. And suddenly I see, Andrew and everybody he's working with come forward and say, there's a way we can do this that actually ends up benefiting people. There's a way that we could offer people their own control over their financial future, put their own life in their hands, but make it for everyone, right? Again, human-centered capitalism. That's a very, very, very strange thing to hear. But, if you read about it, suddenly we realize that there is actually a way that people can have financial freedom and people can control their life and it not be just pitting us all against each other. And that's why I thought UBI was so wonderful. I'll give you just a personal example. I have a younger brother who has autism, and on the high functioning to low functioning scale, he's in an interesting place because he's very social, he's very lovable, capable, and friendly. But there are a lot of things on the mechanical level that he's incapable of. There will be times where he can play video games like a champ, and then times where he has trouble moving the faucet on the shower. Is that what you call it? Is it a faucet? Definitely not, right? You know what I mean. And Holden would do an amazing job working in hospitality. He wants to work at a movie theater. He wants to greet people. He wants to, move people's bags at hotels. But he will not be able to have a completely financially sustainable life because he can't work more than part-time, he can't drive, and he's going to have a lot of different issues taking his future into his hands. But we know that he's capable of it. We know that there's such a bright light in that kid that we have to share with everybody else. If Holden's getting $1,000 a month after he turns 18, he's going to have the ability to live in a situation with other special needs people and somebody who can take care of them, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to afford it. If Holden has $1,000 a month, he can become a part of our community that is able to give everything he wants to and also be able to live. And it was amazing when I heard that, because I said there are a lot of people in this country who I know can be doing a lot more for themselves, for other people, if they had something onto which they can fall back. And I don't like to use the words fall back because that's a little negative, but if there was a universal basic income for people like Holden, for people like my cousin who, as Andrew has spoken about a lot, comes from an abusive home that she wasn't able to leave because she didn't have the financial security, you see a lot more people in this country in a human-centered way able to completely redefine, reshape, and take control of their future. And again, if you're all like me, the future has become a very scary word. And a lot of things look as though, a lot of just parts of our life look as though they are steadily declining. In the 40s, 90% of people were expected to do better than their parents. In the 80s, that dropped to 50%, and it has been steadily dropping since. That's sad. There used to be a time when the spirit of this country was, we're going to do better every time. You're going to do better. We're just going to keep on building up. And we are breaking down because of things like the systems that Andrew is coming in here to change up. Capitalism becoming about people first, our economy becoming about people first, and a lot more room in this country for human beings specifically to respect and work with each other. Because human beings are about to need each other. I mean, the robots have already won the revolution. I joke about that a lot, but it's very true. In Iowa, a good amount of the jobs are about to become automated. A lot of people in Iowa are incredibly susceptible to susceptible is not a good word for it, but a lot of people here have their jobs at risk because of automation. A lot of people all over the middle of the country are about to lose jobs in farming, in driving, and all these different things because the robots are about to do it better. And that's it sounds like it's hard for us to wrap our heads around, so we don't look at it. That was a lot of AI and automation for me when I started looking at Andrew's campaign. I said, okay, great, I'm sure somebody out there will handle it. And now we kind of lost that. I remember I read an interview in what I believe was Wall Street Journal where somebody said in the early 2000s that that the internet will have as much effect on business as the fax machine did. And now the internet is business. I mean, do you think we would have predicted influencers? Now we have those. And that's why I support Andrew Yang. He's going to help us change the world and give us a future where maybe we don't have influencers. I'm just kidding. I don't know what influencers are. It's a very, very vague word. But I believe now there are some questions that I'm going to be asked. I hope none of them are too personal. But again, thank you guys for coming here. It's days like this where we got to be moving. It's the days where other people don't want to be. Are you okay? Sorry?
I'll just stand here.
Oh, awesome.
I wanted to know, was there a specific moment where you decided, I'm going to come out publicly for Andrew Yang?
Sure.
You haven't already?
It was the December debate. Because there had been many times before that where I had watched the debates, and despite only having less than 15 seconds to talk, I had said that Andrew was the one up there who was making the most sense. But the December debate came along, and I was not only so impressed with what Andrew was bringing to the table and his ability to connect with people up there, it was that I was also just so frustrated with everything else I was hearing from everybody else. Because Andrew goes up here and he says, look, this whole thing is ridiculous. The fact that we even have to do these debates is ridiculous, and we're all talking in circles and painting ourselves into ideological corners. And I said, correct. So deliver. And then he did. He did. He brought it all, and everybody else that I saw up there. While there were so many great ideas being talked about, and while there were so many people offering great solutions, it's the same thing every time. I have a lot of friends who are conservative. And I asked them why they don't watch the Democratic debates, because they're very politically involved. And they say, because it's the same thing every time. And they're right. It's the same thing every time. It's the same issues, except sometimes they forget important ones. Sometimes we'll have a debate where they're talking about everything, but now we're not going to talk about immigration. It's all, I noticed that Andrew was the candidate that was the least involved with taking what everybody else found to be the most marketable and accessible idea in the polls and running with that. Andrew said, this is what I'm going to do. And if you don't like it, go to my website, read about it again.
Speaking of that and the policies that you mentioned, including UBI, are there any other policies that really connected with you that he either talked about at the debate or that you've read on his website?
Sure. I think that his Medicare policy is great because it addresses issues that are very often alluded to, but there's never really full action taken, specifically controlling the price of pharmaceuticals. I come from a family where we all have our own slews of mental health issues. If you saw the amount of pills in my house, you'd think we were a pharmacy. And the prices of pharmaceuticals are really, in my opinion, one of the biggest issues here, because you see a lot of people in this country not medicating and not taking care of their own issues because the prices are getting ridiculous. I'm lucky enough to be on an insurance plan where I'm able to buy my pills, cheap enough. But once I saw that Andrew was looking at issues like the pharmaceutical prices, looking at investing in new types of medical technology, these aren't things you hear. You hear either we are going to go this progressive way or we are going to go the more moderate way. And we don't realize that words like progressive are assigned to a certain type of idea, But right now, Andrew's doing something new and doing something that people haven't done before. And if that's not progressive, I don't know what is. So I'd say the Medicare policy was super important to me. And I mean, while I think across the board everything was very strong between the freedom dividend and all of that, I think that his plan to go carbon neutral by 2050 was great, especially because there were steps. That's the whole thing that I'd like you all to remember to talk about when you're discussing Andrew with people. There are actually steps when he talks about something, you know. But there's a line that he draws between 2020 and 2050 that is missing with a lot of different plans. And when I saw the steps that he wanted to take, I said, this is difficult, but this is something that can happen. And this is something that I know he'd work to set the groundwork for. And that's one of the reasons that as a youth, which I'm hesitant to call myself because at this point I feel rather jaded, but as a youth, I look at ideas like the carbon neutral plan and all that, and I say, what he's doing is he wants to become president to lay the foundation for other people to take control of our future. As a young person, I'm seeing Andrew want young people to invest in themselves and in each other. And that's really special to me because there are different campaigns I see all over, not just presidential, really all over our current political landscape, where it's all about, okay, great, this is bad, so we are going to try and make it slightly worse and just get us to the next election. That's the big thing for me is there are so many candidates I'll see where it's about getting us to the next election without this bad thing. In this year, it's Trump, right? This is about we just can't have Trump, and then we'll figure it out. Well, the idea of and then we'll figure it out has been thrown around for a while, and we haven't figured it out because we've been recycling the same ideas and putting different name tags on them for decades. And Andrew's, if you look at Andrew's website, you see ideas that are not just other people's with fancy bows on them, and they're also ideas that work together. I've noticed his whole platform, it's a circle. Everything, the whole plan meshes and everything can work at the same time. UBI and his Medicare plan, different ideas for going carbon neutral. There's a holistic unity there, and that is the idea of people in this country actually being able to find financial and economic incentives to make the world a better place. Because there is a lot of money in making the world cleaner. And I think that's an important thing to look at. And it's also important to make sure, I don't remember what it's called, but somebody compared climate change prevention and the technologies we're going to develop for it to the space race, where everybody's going to be finding all the money in cleaning the earth, and then we suddenly realize that now it's just become a financial game. So Andrew's policies turn everything in their own special way into something where people can actually benefit from becoming a more positive and dedicated member of their communities and just the country, which I think is really special.
All right, and then I just have one more question for you, and then we're going to open it up to the rest of the people here. What kind of role do you think that advocacy on the ground level is going to have in this election?
In this election, advocacy in every election, but I think in this election specifically, advocacy on the ground level is how it's going to happen. I remember the first time I met somebody from Yang's campaign, he was one of, I think, 4 people. And I didn't think that he was on the staff because I didn't think that Yang had a staff. You hear that voice crack? Yeah, I guess I am the youth. But I didn't think he had a staff. And this guy comes up to me and I say, who's this guy talking? And he says, his name is Andrew Yang. I think you should take a look at him. I know he really cares about what he's doing and he really cares about you. And I said, oh, wow, he already has a really big fan. I didn't know that he was working for him. But if you look at campaigns like Andrew's and like few others, but specifically Andrew's, it's about activism because it's about word of mouth. Because Andrew isn't a name recognition campaign. Andrew isn't you've seen this guy run for 8 things before, maybe this is his year. And he's not a politician. And I said this last night, but saying he's not a politician is a dangerous thing because that's what people said about Trump. And I always say Trump has been a lying, manipulative, financially evil, skeevy, disgusting sociopath his entire life. Whether or not he's in office, that's a politician. Andrew's just like a guy who my uncle said was nice. So, people like Andrew, you get a lot. You get to see what activism and advocacy and groundwork does when you see Andrew's campaign, because you see something that from word of mouth went from something that was that I looked at as a great idea but a flash in the pan, to a campaign that has now changed the game. I think that Andrew's campaign should at least serve as an example for a lot of different campaigns moving forward, because it was a campaign that was run on not playing the game in a dirty, manipulative way like other people, and just being fun. That was the whole thing. Whenever I go to Columbia, and at school there's like a Columbia for every candidate group, and you see so many great dedicated youth advocates, and you get to see a lot of people working and doing and acting as though they are now adults who have really fully moved into the world. And there's a special thing about the Columbia for Yang group, because they are doing positive work, they are reaching a lot of people, and they look like they're having fun. And that's because it's a campaign and a movement that is rooted in people connecting with other people. And that's the really special thing about it. So when it comes to advocacy, I'd say that the Yang gang has realized that just talking about Yang with people goes a long way. It's actually remarkable how much of a change you see in somebody's views on Andrew once they just look at the website one time. And I'm glad that the campaign has realized that. It's all about just getting people to look once. It's been the case with a lot of my friends. I had friends where we were all watching the debate together. Oh my God, my friends at college and we watched the debate together the way people would watch a sports game. We're sitting there, and I would just see somebody go, come on, go, dude. And I would hear Yang somehow. I would pause it. I go, you see that? See that, guys? And they'll just say, Cameron, what are you talking about? They'd go to the website and they'd say, okay, I understand. Some people I have gotten to change their vote. I've gotten certain people to actually go out and advocate for Andrew. But at the very least, everybody who reads his policies say, okay, that makes sense. And that's the special thing, and that's why advocacy here is so important. It's just about getting people to look.
All right, so we're going to take some questions now. Totally.
Thanks. Hey, Cameron, thanks for coming out here. So you've been thrust into some pretty extraordinary circumstances with your life. But at the same time, a lot of people were and didn't necessarily respond in the way that you have. I think some of the damage that Hollywood has inadvertently done is advanced the great man theory of history, where we think it's just one great individual making change, but in fact you've been on the front lines of change, and it seems like it's much more of a movement-based phenomenon. And so the question I wonder is the Yang Gang going to find out in time? And so can you offer any perspective as somebody who's been a part of change in terms of how change actually happens?
Sure, yeah, that's a great question. I'd say that beyond, I agree with just about everything you said. Beyond just the Hollywood aspect, I think it's a little bit more of a storytelling aspect, and that's why you see so much of Hollywood involved, as they're storytellers. But the idea of the great man, the person everybody wants to get behind, is an exciting, unifying thing, but it's also incredibly dangerous, because you get people who will get involved with a movement because they love the ideas of the person involved, but they love the person involved, but they don't always look as far into what they're standing for, because it's exciting. You know, it's exciting to see a candidate all around. It's exciting to see somebody talk at an event and say, that's going to be our next Kennedy, I'm telling you. You know how often I hear that's going to be our next Kennedy? That's a last name, and it's a last name from a family who's contributed so very much to our country. But people idealize people, like you said, and they don't idealize ideas, which is ironic because you can't spell idealize without idea. But one thing that I think the Yang campaign has really noticed is that, again, it's the idea of putting people first that's going to get people behind the movement, and that's why it's a movement-based thing. The reason that so many people love Andrew is because Andrew is not that guy who's trying to go up there and be the savior of the world. And that's what he talks about so much, is he goes up on the debate stage and he goes up at his speeches and he says, I didn't want to do this my whole life. You know, I'm not here because I always thought that I should be the president of the United States. I'm here because there are things we need to do and changes we need to make. And that's where the Yang campaign hits that on the head, is this is not about finding our one guy who's going to save the country. This is not that Yang is the man who's going to do this. We're going to put Yang in front of this. Yang, Yang, Yang. It's about a set of ideas that are being introduced by somebody who is introducing these ideas to put them in the hands of younger generations who will carry them forward. Because Yang can't get what Yang needs to get done unless there are advocates around the country who will say, great, this guy's going to be president. When he's gone, we need to keep this moving. So I'd say what you were saying is it's something I think a lot of more people need to be talking about on campaign trails, which is, you know, we need to stop focusing on single people, thinking that this is the person who's going to do this, because it's not about that. It's about introducing ideas that need people to work on them further, because a lot of different campaigns, it's just people campaigning to be president for 4 or 8 years. They want to get elected, they want to be president, they have these ideas, and they say, my ideas are the ones that are the most likely to get me elected president, and then I'm going to be not president. And then somebody else is going to be president. Whereas Andrew wants to come in here and lay the groundwork to say, here's the change I want to make to the game, and I really, really believe in all of you to take these incentives that I'm offering to invest in yourselves and each other and to move this forward, which is why one of the things about the Yang campaign that really got me involved was not left, not right, forward. It's what I believe Yang's campaign is, and it's what has gotten a lot of my conservative friends behind the movement, because a lot of my friends will talk about how we'll talk about how they might not have supported Trump, they might have supported Trump, but they're definitely, their ideas are conservative. And what they like about Yang is that while he is definitely a Democratic candidate, while he's definitely much more progressive, he wants Americans to have their futures and their lives in their own hands in a really special way. So I think that there's a universality to that that's important, and there's universality to the movement. It's not about one person, it's about the whole thing, you know?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
All right, are there any other questions? May not quite stretch.
First of all, thanks for coming out here, Cameron.
for
Really
having me.
appreciate it. So if you could adjust or add a certain portion to Yang's platform, what would you want to add?
It's a great question. This one is very specific, but I just read quite a bit about different veterans with PTSD who have used, and there's going to be absolutely no strong language or vernacular in the sentence, but have used Denver's new medical mushroom laws, and have actually been have been taking these. Is there a better word than mushrooms for it?
Psilocybin.
Okay, I'm not gonna. Psilocybin have been going through these treatments and have seen amazing results. And I know that I've heard Andrew talk about this different thing when he's discussing different ways that we can offer new incentives to help people who are fighting things like addiction to pharmaceutical drugs. You see the opioid crisis ravaging the country right now, and people say you see the opioid crisis ravaging the country. They never take it any further than that. They never talk about how we want to control these prices. They never talk about incentives we can make. And when Andrew says that he wants to invest in new types of technology to make, new types of healthcare technology, things like psilocybin, they're a great start, because you see psilocybin, you see medical marijuana, which I always thought we should call it cannabis, because I thought that marijuana was something that was a word a lot of people didn't like. But I realized I think the whole country is just has kind of figured out that we need to make legal marijuana recreational. I really think so. All the young conservatives I know are all about it. It's just kind of the older generation, the McConnell types, who will cite the Bible or something. But I'd say, yeah, I think that between medical marijuana, things like psilocybin, and just newer answers to these issues, that's one of the things I'd like to see, because Yang has great cannabis policies. He really does. I really love the way that he phrases it as well, because I always talk about it. I always say, well, this is something that could be used to help people, and it's something that could just drastically change the way that humans medicate and the way that we get addicted to things. My mother had a surgery recently that was immensely painful to her, but my grandmother struggled with addiction her entire life, and my mom said she could not do that to us. So she did not take painkillers because she couldn't get addicted to them. And that was an eye-opener for me, because I said, this is a real issue, is people will have a horrible accident and then the effects will last forever because they're addicted to a life-ruining drug. Cannabis, if recreational marijuana were legal, I would be able to, my stepdad would be able to go to the store and then come back, and my mom would feel better, and Florida would have more, would get a lot more money in taxes. So psilocybin is something I'd like to see on the website, and I'd like to see Andrew come out about it a bit more. I know that he has before said that he's supportive of all different types of, not all, I was about to say all different types of technologies in medicine, but that is something that is very dangerous, because I've seen some very strange, new initiatives. But everything Andrew has supported when it comes to new answers to different medical problems has been great, and I think that that's just another place you can go with it. I don't know if Andrew would be behind this. I don't. I need to talk to him about it. But I think that there is legislation we could pass to protect certain intellectual properties from the past from getting rebooted. Because I know that Andrew has seen a lot of movies that I don't like and given very positive reviews. But there are certain things that are about to get rebooted that cannot be rebooted. I don't want to talk about it, because the Yang Gang is a campaign of positivity, and I know that a lot of talented people work on these movies. A lot of dedicated creators will put their mind behind something. One of the biggest ideological differences I've ever had with Andrew was when he said that he liked The Rise of Skywalker. Because look, he saw the movie before I did, and I said, you know what? I genuinely said this to my friends. Well, you know what? Yang likes it, so let's go see it. I remember that conversation. I was in Parkland. If you ever go to Parkland, Florida, you realize there's nothing to do, so we all see a lot of movies. I saw Uncut Gems 4 times over winter break, but we were all talking about it, and I saw the movie, and I said, Andrew, what was that about? And I realized that, this is a movement of positivity, but if Andrew could implement new laws to protect certain things like Home Alone, they're going to do an E.T. reboot. I hope you all know. There's going to be a new E.T. movie coming out, and Andrew could have stopped it. That's my speech. Oh, wait, I never thought about that before. There really is going to be an E.T. reboot, and it's going to be creepy. Because it's going to be a CGI E.T. Any other questions? The whole point is that he was a puppet.
Hey, thank you for coming here. So I'm guessing that given your background and introduction to political activism.
Yes, I am a Scorpio.
Sure. Gun control would probably be a pretty big issue for you. What about Andrew Yang's policy on gun control makes him the specific Democratic debate or Democratic
Hopeful
candidate that you support? Many Democratic candidates have extremely comprehensive gun control platforms. It's a huge issue with, atrocities happening all the time. Yeah.
Sure. Well, I'd say that one of the first things to note is that if you are somebody who is a specifically gun control voter, you're a little bit lucky in the primaries because a lot of gun control policies look almost exactly the same. Because this is an issue we found the solution for a long time ago, and that's kind of what most of my advocacy was saying, hey, you have all these people asking what's the answer to this. Well, we gave you the answer decades ago. And so far, doing nothing about it has proven to do, shocker, nothing. So if gun control is at the front of your list, it's nice to know that a lot of people are going to look very similar. What I'd say there are 2 points to that I'd make. Hello. 2 points I make there. Number one, gun control is only the first thing I vote on if I think the candidate has particularly bad gun control policies. Other than that, I think that in a presidential campaign, gun control as the first thing on your list, it's not for me. I think that a lot of candidates have there's not a single candidate in the primary right now whose gun control policies I do not support. I think that some of them are much, much stronger than others, but at the end of the day, right now, I think that when it comes to putting guns first, that's something I do more at a state level as opposed to a national level, because there's only so much you could do in certain situations like that. So in Florida's races, it's a big problem because Florida is a state that loves its guns, and that's something I look at a lot. But on a national level, I have a completely different conversation about it, because one thing I learned about this country, and I don't know that much about this country, but one thing I learned about this country was that a lot of people don't really take into account the fact that we've got the whole bicameral legislature aspect of this. People say that the president gets elected, and then the president's elected, and they're the president, and the president is the president. Well, they forget the fact that we've got a House and we've got the Senate, and that everything needs to go through that. There was a bipartisan background check bill introduced almost a year ago now that's been collecting dust on McConnell's desk ever since. So we can, I think that as long as presidential candidates' gun control policies cover what I need them to cover, it becomes an issue that is on the list for me, but then I look at other things. What I'd say about Andrew's policy that I really like is the fact that it's everything I want, including, it's everything I want, and he did not add a mandatory buyback of assault weapons. I am very, very, very actively against mandatory buybacks of assault weapons. I'm for buyback programs and the funding of buyback programs, but the idea of a mandatory buyback of assault weapons is something that I've never connected with for 2 reasons. Number one, every time a policy is introduced in this country, there's one question everybody should ask. There's 2 questions everybody should ask. How and with what money? Well, let's look at the how first. Mandatory assault weapon buyback. Okay, so you've got a lot of people in this country. How are you going to force them to sell you back their weapons? Logistically speaking, it's pretty much impossible. Believe me, I've thought about it a lot. And then there's the idea that I spent about a year of my life putting every second of every day into telling people from this country, we need to make this country a safer place. We need it to be better for everybody. And we are not coming for your guns. We just need to introduce laws that make the country safer. Well, there's nothing more coming for your guns than mandatory assault weapons buybacks. Mandatory assault weapons buybacks are, we are coming for your guns. And Andrew's here saying we need to make the country a safer place by introducing thorough legislation that's, in a way that can actually be done, makes the country safer. So that was a big thing for me, I'd say, was being able to see his platform and seeing that's what he wants to do with it.
All right, any last questions?
I would add I think UBI would actually help people's mental health, and that might also help this issue that we just talked about. This isn't a question, it's just a comment. I just want to thank you for stepping out into the light and doing something positive with your platform. I know a lot of people that have a following might be afraid to step out and stand up for somebody like Andrew because it might be unpopular. So it's just a thank you.
Thank you, man. And thank you all for coming, because again, this is a cold and disgusting Saturday morning. And yet we're all here talking about the issues that matter, and that's important. I can tell you that to that point, I know a lot of people who have told me that they want to support and vote for Andrew that are not going to be public about it. And I also can tell you that a lot of people I know in Florida are all about getting behind and supporting Andrew, but Florida's Florida, and that's an important state. I'm spending a lot of time this year in Florida and Pennsylvania, but I know a lot of people in Florida who are all about Andrew and who want to get behind Andrew. I got to tell you, my stepdad, who has never ever done anything but vote for the most vanilla candidates possible. He'll look down the list and say, okay, which of these candidates are the most plain and boring in the race? I remember when we were going into 2020, before anybody had announced, he was doing something in the fridge, and I looked at him. I was like, "Who do you think you're going to vote for in 2020?" He's like, "I don't know, Biden or something." But it was the or something that really did it for me, because he said, "Okay, I'm going to go vote for the Democrat who has a D in parentheses in front of their name." And then he comes up to me a couple weeks ago and he said, "Have you heard of Andrew Yang?" Mind you, this is after I had already been tweeting about Andrew, had already been supportive publicly of Andrew. He's like, "Do you know who this guy is?" Yes. I mean, MSNBC doesn't, but I know who he is. And he said, "I really like him." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Well, I saw something somewhere that said that this is a real story. He said that I saw something somewhere that said that somebody got his name wrong. And then I looked him up, and I really like what he has to say." Which makes me think that maybe we need to reshape the Yang campaign to simply be based in examples of people leaving Andrew out of things. Because a lot of people, we know what it's like to be one of the 10 candidates on a list where they say there's 10 and then leave our name off of it. I forget where. There was a list of 10 candidates that it was the qualifications for a debate or a certain fundraising level, and it said, "Here are the 10 candidates." There's 9 candidates, and Yang's name wasn't there, and we've all been that. I was the last person to get picked in the dodgeball game because I was in drama. We all know what that's like. I don't know why I was saying any of that. Thank you. That's the point.
Yeah, thank you, Cameron, for coming out and talking to us today, and everybody for being here. And thank you to Uptown Bills for letting us host this event here. I just wanted to once again encourage you guys, if you're passionate about Andrew, you want to know more, get out there, get involved, canvass with our local office.
The local office, I was there last night. It's so much fun. It's so much fun. I felt like I was at a party. It was great. Sorry to interrupt.
And it's always like that. So thanks again, guys. Let's give Cameron one more round of applause.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, everybody. Thank you.